My name's Zahra Hirji. I'm a climate reporter at Bloomberg Green, and I'm very excited about this town hall. So this is the Climate Vice Town Hall. If you're not familiar with that term, it's one that maybe isn't used a lot. It's one that my editor and I sort of use as shorthand, as either maybe it's your guilty pleasure that is a pretty carbon-intensive activity, or maybe it's something that's just the most carbon-intensive activity in your life, and you know it, and you want to change it, or you're struggling, and you're just like trying to figure out what to do about it. And this isn't a panel about shaming people about their climate vices. I think it's more acknowledging that we all have it. This is where we are in the world, and sort of similar to the climate anxiety panel, if anyone went earlier. It's talking about it more, kind of being vulnerable with one another about that we have this and we're on this journey. I am going to let our pretty awesome panel quickly introduce themselves and go down the line, and then I will ask the first question, and afterwards we're going to open this up to the audience. So I hope you guys have come with questions. And with that, I will let you, Dounia, take it away.
Oh, yes, I forgot to Hi, everyone. So I'm Dounia Wone, and I flew from Paris to be here today with you, so I hope we're going to have a lot of questions. I'm the Chief Impact Officer at Vestiaire Collective, and Vestiaire Collective is a global luxury peer-to-peer second-hand platform. We are a French-based company, but we've been on the market for 15 years. We are now in 80 countries, and we are operating in the US from New York and Brooklyn, where we have our offices. And basically, now US is our biggest market because you're very much, I'm saying you, but most of you, I hope, coming from US, very much interested in second-hand and good buyers and sellers. So because this market is very mature, we saw great opportunity to enter that market. So yeah, that's me.
Jeremy?
Hi, everyone. My name is Jeremy Sampson. I'm the CEO of an organization called the Travel Foundation. We are a global nonprofit organization which works very closely with the travel and tourism sector on a variety of things. But the main way to think about us is that we are an organization that advocates for the stakeholders in travel that no one else is advocating for. So the communities themselves who host travelers and who host the tourism writ large. The environment and the resources that the industry actually depends on for its business and for its long-term survival, and for you all to enjoy beaches and mountains and hikes. So we advocate for those voices and those perspectives in the broad dialogue around travel and tourism's impact, and ultimately driving towards tourism becoming more of a net positive for places. And climate change is one of our key issues, and we've been working to accelerate the industry's response to the climate crisis and its capabilities to adapt.
Great. Mary?
Hi, everybody. My name is Mary Purdy. I am an Eco-Dietitian nutritionist and also the managing director of an organization called the Nutrient Density Alliance. And I was in clinical practice for about 13 years, working with thousands of patients to prevent and address and reverse chronic diseases using a very food as medicine, personalized nutrition approach. And then I transitioned about 6 years ago to start working at the intersection of sustainable food systems and climate change and environment and human health. And specifically at the Nutrient Density Alliance, we are a group of thought leaders working in the agricultural sector, the food industry, the healthcare sector, to help to connect those dots between regenerative agriculture, which we know to be a potential solution for the climate crisis, and the improved nutrition of the food that is grown in that way. Not only because of the enhanced nutritional value and the increase in nutrients themselves, but also due to the lack of, or the absence of those chemicals that we see used in so many conventional models of our industrial food system currently. So that's it. Great to be here.
And Kate?
Hi, everybody. I'm Kate Kurtz. I work for City of Seattle, so I'm a municipal worker here. And I do a few different things related to sustainability for the city. I don't know. So I see one of my colleagues here, Pat. He's the best. Okay, so I think Pat would probably like describe me as the compost lady for the city. So if you've noticed, everywhere you go, there's a green bin. So, and that is for food and yard waste, goes into our municipal collection system. You guys, it is actually illegal to put your food and yard waste in the garbage in the city of Seattle. I don't know if you knew this, but it is illegal. And I know, right? I moved here and I was like, we don't have to do it in my backyard anymore. This is the best. I'm never leaving, and I never did. I live here now. So anyhow, so my job is to really help to set up the system, to do that collection, to help inform people of that they need to do it and why they should do it, but also to help people use that on the back end, right? So I also help to manage our natural yard care gardening programs and sustainable landscaping programs, because recycling is not sorting. It's actually using those products that we make from the collection of those materials into something else and actually replacing virgin materials instead. So that's what I do.
Let's give them a quick round of applause. So we have fashion, travel and tourism, and food. Great experts here, and I'm pretty excited to talk with them. But of course, because of the name of this town hall, the obvious question is, first, can you share, one of your climate vices and what, if anything, you are doing about it? And why don't we start with you, Kate, and then we can make our way back down. Putting you on the spot.
Okay, I will share, and if you want to shame me, you can. I will deal with it. Okay, so I thought hard about this, and like the obvious ones were like driving, beef, right? I have those vices, but really what I thought about, okay, you guys, I have a spindrift problem. You know those little like bubbly waters, right? They come in an aluminum can. Oh my gosh, the pleasure I get like on a hot afternoon from just going into the refrigerator and getting a cold spindrift and cracking it open and the sound. And I have a soda stream so that I'm not having all these aluminum cans. I know they can be recycled, but you guys, we cannot recycle our way out of this problem. We need to just stop having all of these single-use things. That's my vice.
That's a good one.
I feel you on the Spindrift and the LaCroix and the numerous others that are out there. Yeah. I would say I get cold all the time. I'm probably the only person who is freezing right now, and also brought a sweater with me today and a scarf. And so where I have lived often requires turning on heat using gas, and I get so cold I just have to keep on turning on the heat, burning up that gas because I got to survive. But one thing I am doing about it is just wearing more clothes. It helps. Long underwear, I don't see my feet or my shoulders for like 10 months out of the year. Arm gloves, that all helps. So that's my vice, turning up the heat.
We call it Spinny D in our house.
I'm not alone.
And grapefruit, it's so good.
It's so good.
There's often a line of cans on my desk. And our soda stream is collecting cobwebs. It's bad.
I will note this is not an official advertisement for Spindrift.
Forget the rest of them, Spinny D. It's my vice. No. So I live in Spokane, across the state. And we pretty regularly now have a burn ban. I assume the same across the state. A burn ban all summer. And I immediately ran out and just bought a little propane fire for our family because it sucks not being able to have a fire. And it's not awesome for the environment to have these little propane lit fires. But I just cannot raise my kids without campfires and that sort of thing, and so yeah, shame me if you want, but I couldn't wait to go run out and get one, and it's an experience, and it also is interesting. It helps you think about, like, in real terms, the importance of how these things like affect our lives, right? Like I cannot imagine having a summer where we don't sit around a fire on a regular basis and roast marshmallows and that sort of thing, and to be able to not be able to have that experience with my kids, I just couldn't do it. So
I feel I am the worst. So I've got all those vibes. Not the fire-related thing, but like I can relate to everything that you said. But I think, and maybe that's the funny thing in my life, that I keep asking people to stop buying stuff, buying shitty clothes, buy less but buy better, and reduce their consumption. This is my day-to-day work. Like I've been doing it inside the company, outside the company, in panels and everything. But because also I am on that freaking platform, excuse my French, looking at clothes all the time, I just want to buy them. So sometimes I buy a lot, but then I will go and sell, because I just like too much on that. So I am the worst, I think, because my job is to educate people, and then I just buy and resell, give me the thinking that I am in the right loop, but it's
Yeah, you have the business model down. So,
yeah. But I'm fueling the business
I was going to
model.
use a similar one for travel, and I'm saving it for the real talk.
Also, there's
So that's my
no
point.
shaming. That's the whole point. And because I feel like I can't make you guys ask this without saying it myself, I also have a ton of vices. And I did write about one of these earlier in the year, which was eating red meat, to someone that kind of has grown up with a father who's from Tanzania. Literally, one of my uncles has his own meat shop. And I have, since March, stopped eating mostly red meat. Goat and lamb has been the hardest, and I've only had it twice at family dinners where I had to take a bite of my mom's, brisket, or else I would be shamed by her for the rest of my life. So, but with that, I would love to open the floor if people have questions. Please raise your hand, and then we have a couple of people who can bring over the mic, and I would say please say your name. If you're from here or what you do, just a quick little title, not your full life story. Please have a question, not a monologue. I will cut you off. And if your question is directed to someone specifically, please just say so at the beginning. And I think we have a question right here up front.
Hi, my name is Bob. I live here in Seattle, and I was just informed that I've been breaking the law for the last 2 years.
It's a safe space.
So I guess a couple of questions. First is, how do I properly dispose of all of my food waste living in an apartment in Seattle without that communication from a landlord or anything? Second is, I lived abroad for quite a long time, specifically in South Korea, where, food waste is a pretty big deal. And my wife is Korean, so we try to separate our food waste, but then inevitably we don't really know what to do with it. So how do we educate our country on food waste, and how do we make food waste easier to deal with?
There was a lot there. Maybe we start with here in Seattle, and then we can move bigger.
Yeah. Okay, well, Bob, thank you for sharing that. I want to let you know that the gentleman sitting next to you, his name is Pat Kaufman, and I believe he might be the only person in City of Seattle that is actually able to issue fines. And he's sitting next to you. Okay. So, moving on. He's actually on sabbatical right now, so I think you're in the clear. Okay. So what do you do? So it is a legal requirement, City of Seattle, that you have to separate all of your food waste. It cannot go to the landfill. The reason for this is climate. It is climate. When food waste goes to a landfill, it degrades. Anaerobically, it produces methane. Methane is a highly potent, short-lived greenhouse gas. It's a big deal. We don't want that to happen. So we send it to composting here in the City of Seattle. We're actually like an international leader on, in this space. It is a requirement. It sounds like you live in a multifamily building, so an apartment or a condominium complex. Your landlord, building management company, it is actually their job to have these resources available for you. To pass inspection, they have to have it all there. Often they have it there for inspection and then it somehow goes away, is like the anecdotal stories that we get all the time. But what you can do is call up Seattle Public Utilities customer service and say, hey, I live in a multifamily building and we are not being served properly. And we will come in and actually just do the technical assistance. So we have teams of people who will come in and work with the landlord, help set up the system, educate you and your neighbors about how to be sorting your waste properly. And then just to bring that a little bit globally, the reason like this whole like greenhouse gas emissions, that is like disproportionate greenhouse gas emissions that come from landfilling food waste, that is now why food waste is a focus area for EPA and USDA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So this is a national issue. It's an international issue, like really tackling methane. And so the federal government and international governments are really looking to places like Seattle and San Francisco to show like, okay, you guys have rolled out these municipal composting company programs. How can we replicate that? And I'm here in City of Seattle, and I look to places like South Korea, and I'm like, oh, theirs is so much better than ours. So we all have a lot to learn.
And I think, Mary, you wanted to follow on.
Yes, I'm a big fan also of looking at the root cause, right? So we know what to do with food waste, but how do we prevent food waste from happening in the beginning? Since we know it's 6 to 8% of our greenhouse gases. So what is it that is causing us to waste food? Is it about buying too much? Is it about not knowing what to do with that droopy little carrot that's hanging out in the back of your refrigerator? Is it confusion about the best buy dates on your food, which don't mean that you're going to grow a third ear if you eat that yogurt, but it's the date by which the manufacturer of that food believes that the food will taste its best. So I think it's about also looking to the reasons behind why we waste our food and how we can salvage it when it's often very perfectly delicious food, and it saves you money. About $1,800 a year is spent on wasting and losing our food. So that's money in your pocket, my friend.
Yeah.
Wow, yeah. The more you learn. All right. Do we have an additional question? Looks like we have someone over here. Yeah.
I'm wondering, and this is for anybody on the panel, do we risk trivializing the real urgency of this problem by talking about personal vices?
Yes.
Who wants to tackle? Anyone can tackle this.
Yes. Absolutely. I wouldn't say risk is maybe a challenging framing. I think we do need to talk about it, but we need to talk about it alongside the contextualization of like the bigger picture and where responsibility lies. That's my opinion. And we ultimately at the end of the day, in the travel industry, we talk a lot about what is the responsibility of the traveler vis-a-vis like the industry and its ability to affect change at scale. And the travel industry is particularly interesting because it is enormous, and there are many, many small businesses working on the ground at the coalface and the community levels that also face this kind of like, well, why should we do something when the bigger operators above us are not doing it, and is it performative ultimately for us to take all these little actions that add up to what? But you also then step way back and you think, well, change happens because people rise up and people start to understand and demand that that change occurs, and I think part of getting there is building confidence, like having these dialogues, having conversations, getting people aligned and understanding like where the real change will occur and how we can most effectively align ourselves to advocate for it. And so I think it's all part of a process. So maybe at the end it's no. Yeah, I think it's a complicated question.
Dounia?
Yeah, just to build on what you were saying, I think also there is it goes hand in hand, I will say, with like multiple stakeholders. I'm not sure there is a right or wrong answer to your question, but I think it's very interesting. For instance, so from my point of view, and really open for debate, I don't think so it's a bit, in English, I don't think there is a real climate crisis, but more a consumer behavior crisis. And I think we see it on fashion, for instance, and we see that we went from having an outfit for the weekend and having an outfit for the week, like very long time ago, to what we have today if you think about your closet. So the responsibility, and to disclose, before joining Vestiaire, I was doing politics in France, so very much into the institutional system. I truly believe in the regulator and the role of regulation and decision maker, alongside and with brands, for instance, but we see that even brands that do effort are not the ones that are fueling our countries or continent with millions of tons of items. So until they are forced, and I see also in US specifically that looking at the lens of being more local and encourage more local companies rather than accepting all the items coming from China with low quality and that will be discarded and end up in landfills. Like, we see some effort, but I think it goes hand in hand with everything. And when I talk to people and when I'm around the table on a dinner with my friends, they will always ask, where do I start? And how can I do it for my life? Because you want to be part of that effort, even though I truly believe that also, like, the responsibility doesn't fall on your own shoulder, but you're part of the game at the end of the day, somehow, by voting, by changing your habits, by talking to your friends. So I think it's a mix of yes and no.
And then Mary, did you want to add?
I agree. I think it's problematic when we put the onus or the burden on an individual or on a consumer or on an eater when we know that there are structural problems and systemic problems and institutional problems and policy issues that are actually dictating what we have access to, what we are putting on our plates because of what is cheap, what is affordable. And yet, if we can care about that, whether it's about choosing what you eat, what you buy, where you're buying from, how you're having these conversations with people that you work with. There's a difference that I think happens when you start to engage in caring about an issue that helps you to actually become a solution to that problem by being an advocate, by having those conversations, by shopping differently, thinking differently, and that ultimately leads to helping to create that systemic change. We all have a voice, whether it's in our city councilor, our school board. There's an election this year. We can vote in people who actually care about these issues. But if we don't have the personal experience, in my case, when it comes to food and seeing the difference that we might be making in a local community, then we don't necessarily have that same connection to it that I think is necessary to make those bigger systemic changes that we have the possibility of making.
Did you want to add anything? Might as well go down the line. Yeah.
I did. So I started my career as a chemist, and so I'm very data driven, and I just wanted to share a little stat because I wrote them down before I came. Okay, so the answer to your question, I forget your name, you asked, but is it a diversion? Yes, it's a diversion because the system has to be set up. Absolutely. But it's both. We all have a responsibility to play in this. So obviously, like, I don't get to choose what kind of fuel goes into the airplane or where the energy that's coming to my house comes from. That's all infrastructure stuff that needs to be dealt with at the large infrastructure level. The system needs to be set up. But I want to share this statistic with you. So according to Project Drawdown, I don't know if you're familiar with this organization, but the #1 solution that we can do to reduce or sequester our greenhouse gas emissions is reducing food waste. So the estimate is that it's going to, okay, I'm not going to read you the actual numbers, but I want to let you know that that solution is estimated to be more than double the solution related to doing wind turbines or utility scale solar. So it's like, these are infrastructure things that will get us off of fossil fuels, but reducing food waste is still the #1 thing. So, I mean, we have to, it's both. We gotta have both.
And I will just add that on our planning call, I specifically brought this up. We talked about this. And, to acknowledge that, the history of the carbon footprint, big oil, they didn't come up with the term, but they did popularize it, right? And they were intentionally trying to put it on you and not on them and shift the attention. But I think we can acknowledge here that change does happen bottom up and top down. And we're not saying that there shouldn't be system change. And in fact, by doing more, it's a way to kind of bring attention. And also, I'm at Bloomberg, so I feel remiss to say that consumers can send market signals that can also drive change. And it's all of the above. But let's go to another question. Maybe over there with the green lanyard. That's all of you. That's right. I'm sorry. But you knew because we made eye contact.
All of us are welcome to contribute. My name is Leslie. I'm from San Francisco, and I work at a company called Milton Partners. I wanted to sort of come back to this point about systemic change, and I think, in particular, the sort of original question asked about, composting and landlords sort of not fulfilling their part. The Supreme Court decision that sort of gutted the whole everything that underpins what allows the EPA to do what it does on a daily basis, I think is one thing that as a individual I sort of sat back and was like, oh wow, because I think it's already challenging enough to educate yourself on how to consume less, how to travel sustainably, what have you, and so then to have the infrastructure that sort of underpins that all, gutted is its own sort of problem. I guess as professionals, you live and breathe this, but where do you begin to educate yourselves on how to just live more sustainably? Obviously the internet, yes, but I think for me there is also this sometimes sort of information flooding that happens where I think there's a little bit of a loss of where to even begin.
Yes.
Who wants to start?
I can.
Yeah.
I can. So talking for myself, I would say, so yes, I get a lot of information, but tend to be super overwhelmed. And I think and there were a panel about anxiety, but I think at the COVID crisis, I decided that I will choose the information and choose the way of life that I wanted to have. So not saying that you have to stop everything, but I think there is something we call common sense. You were talking about, no, but you were talking about that when you're opening your fridge and you will see the date. You just open and smell, and this will make you say, okay, I can eat that yogurt, for instance. I think it's the same with food or travel, or you keep, my family, so I'm French, but I have multiple origin, and part of my family is in Senegal. I won't stop going to travel there, even though I know plane is super bad for climate. Sorry. And yet there is no train, so I'll keep on living my life, but I will compensate somewhere else. So I would say maybe before buying, you will ask yourself, do I really need it? Can I replace it by a second-hand item? Or I don't know, for instance, so at Vestiaire, we want to understand consumer behavior. And so whenever you buy second-hand, we want to know if there is an impact on your other part of consumption. And this morning I was sharing that at the end of the day, when you're entering circularity, it will have an impact on other industry. So for instance, people who tend to buy second-hand clothes, they will also buy second-hand high-tech, or they will buy second-hand furniture. So it will, it's just, I think it's a journey, and I think in English, journey is the right word, to say go with your own flow and what you're living without adding much more complexity and anxiety from the outside. And then there is a part of, maybe you will try to eat less meat and how do you feel since then? Like, do you feel that your life is crushing, or you really need it, or did you find alternative and it fits you? I think it's that part that we need to trust, because at the end of the day, and I repeat, the infrastructure, the regulators, and they are the ones who will massively change the change.
I guess I'd follow up, and this is for all of you, of if there are, because there can be a lot of information, and that can be overwhelming, and, you know, yes, there's common sense, but I'm curious if there are any particular experts or specific resources that you guys turn to, whether it's for your industry or generally. So you would, I know at the end, Kate, we're talking about like the EPA is starting to track this stuff, and like, is that your go-to for stats, or, you know, who are the voices that you trust, maybe, or the resources?
Yeah. In travel, it's super complicated. First of all, I really noted the parallel with what you said about the current consumption patterns and behaviors, and just how quickly we adapted as a society to, you could just zoom around wherever you like. Not Zoom, the platform, but, you know, on the airplane. And I remember having a talk with my grandma, and my cousin is over there, has the same grandma. And she was born in 1911, and it was 2000, right? And I was like, Grandma, you've been alive a long time, and a lot of things changed. And what was the craziest thing? And she said, well, like, when I was born, we couldn't go anywhere, you know? And it's not that long ago, right? So, like, all of a sudden, we just go wherever we want. And it is a big philosophical question of, like, should we? Because there's a price, and the price is not right. So that's not what the question was. But the question, but then it comes back to then consumer choice. So consumers are not going to stop traveling. Like, Pandora's box is open, and there may have to be limits and regulations. We've seen that happen in COVID, but consumers are going to travel, whether the industry like exists or not. Actually, humans are nomadic. So then it comes down to all the different choices that you all can make. And the industry has done a terrible job of making that information available, accessible. I mean, it is really overwhelming. I am one of the experts in this field in the world, and I make terrible choices because the information is not there at the surface, and usually I'm like, I'm going to pick this one. And I don't always pick the less emitting one because it might be more expensive, or it might have a stop I don't want to make. And when you're making choices, because I'm traveling with a family of 4, I'm not going to make that choice. So my advice, though, is to, when you're trying to understand, there is like another layer of nuance beyond the labels and the badges and the stuff that gets sort of fed to you. And it doesn't take a lot to look for that next layer of information. Like, go to the company's website, they said that they're climate neutral. Or something. Well, what did they mean exactly? And it's there, and it doesn't take, so if you care about these things, you know, like, it's just a tiny bit of research, and unfortunately I don't see it that it's going to be fed to you. AI could probably help you if you wanted to really easily just say, hey, can you like do this for me? AI gets like a little slave sometimes, and it's great. So just go out and make that happen in a way that gets you the information that you need beneath the surface. And I think it's just a detail or two that can help give you the information that's not going to reach you at that immediate level.
I really share your concern around, you know, somebody else making decisions for me and the regulations being rolled back. And I feel actually quite empowered as a citizen eater, to do everything in my power to make sure that my choices, that my place in the world, the way that I interact in the world has as light and as gentle of a footprint on the environment as possible. When it comes to resources, when it comes to the food industry, it is rampant with misinformation, disinformation, greenwashing, and that is highly problematic. And people are very different in terms of their their food cultures, right? So some of the resources that I really appreciate are the ones, I'm going to name a couple just for people if they want to write them down or whatever. Foodprint, I think, is a great resource. Civil Eats, which I think brings in the environmental and food justice and racial justice piece of the climate conversation as it relates to food, which is really critical and often underrepresented in these conversations. John Hopkins Center for a Livable Future is a go-to. The World Wildlife Fund, as it relates, again, to this food system, is really important. And the thing that I think is really important when it comes to reading material around food and what is the most eco-friendly food and what is good, what is bad, is looking to see who is also funding those studies, who is sitting on the board, who is on the advisory council. Because you will sometimes go to like, oh, look at this, it's a .org, the Integrity Center for Food and Family Farms of America. Like, doesn't that sound amazing? And then you look and see who's on the board, who's funding this company. It's a .org, but it's actually being funded by the very agribusinesses who are served by perpetuating the industrial farming practices that are putting us in so much trouble from a climate, environment, and human health perspective. So. Critical eye, and I'd be happy to share more resources with you. I have an entire website devoted to PubMed articles, consumer-facing articles, organizations who put out really valid reports, and I'd be happy to share that with you. So I spend my entire life making sure that information is not poorly communicated and that's not disinformation.
So I already cited one that I go to, which is Project Drawdown. That's
Yes.
one that I think they just put things into easy to understand terms and stuff like that. I'm a data wonk, and so I go into things like the EPA WARM model. So this is something that you can do. EPA has great information, as does IPCC.
Yes.
There's lots of really good information out there. The challenge there is that for most of it, you really have to have strong science literacy skills that most of the public they don't have a degree. Like I have a master's degree in soil science. Like most people don't have a degree in which they've been specifically trained to look at numbers and decipher this kind of like information and stuff. So that's really the challenge and why it's so critical that we have people like you and strong climate reporting that's able to take this complex information and distill it down into like digestible nuggets that we can all like understand. But also I think that like truly all humans get the most of our information from our peers and watching normalizing behavior, and I think that's the most important thing, that we all have a role to play in normalizing behavior. The behavior that you want to see in the world, just do it. You're influencing people even if you're not talking.
I'd also like to think that you can trust the reporting at Bloomberg Green. And if you have specific questions or about companies or whatever, and you're like, I have not seen an article on this, or I cannot find this thing, you can email me or my colleagues, and I will probably want to look into it. Because if you have that question, I probably have that question. I saw a couple more hands. Let's do over there, and then we'll jump back over here.
Hello. Thank you so much, Mary. I feel like I've just been scribbling like a lot of notes from what you shared, but kind of along this gentleman's question, the same vein, if we're acknowledging that it's not individuals that have caused widespread climate destruction, and it is like unregulated corporations, of all the problem sets that you all uniquely like tackle, fashion, food, travel, public utilities, urban design, could you just share best practices in lobbying at the municipal, state, or like federal level for your issues that you support in you said, Jeremy, your areas of expertise? Because I think as like young leaders, like, you're really passionate about like your problem space and like knowing what you want the future to be like. But I think the most hurdles that at least we've faced is how do we successfully like just be able to turn those like areas or that attention to policy change, not acknowledging that's the only way we can really get widespread change and how we can actually regulate these corporations.
I learned a few days ago that in the European Commission, there is approximately 58,000 lobbyists for a couple of hundred MPs. That's a lot. They are based in Brussels. And for fashion, there is a small thousand. And for circularity, less than 10. So yes, I truly, I think there is also how do we manage to structure and get into the real talk, because also, so in fashion especially, I think there is the problem of David against Goliath. We are small compared to big company. Recently, Shein proposed so they want to do an IPO they wanted to do in US. US refused. Now they're trying in London, and because London is but climate crisis, and then they're we have 200 billions to give, to share. And we will re-inject in your economy, so everyone is listening, and Shein is becoming sustainable, and maybe but they have 200 people lobbying everywhere in Europe for their own model. Mm-hmm. So just for their brand. So yes, and so because we are small, we are trying to gather with other stakeholders. So we're doing a lot in Paris and in Europe. We are trying to do it also in US. And it's very far away from our business. There is no business opportunity for us to go and stay and call out Brussels and ask for less discriminative laws against circularity versus linear business model, the old model of fashion. And yet, there is, I think, hope somewhere, because what we decided to do, because we were super small, is that to take action as a company. So 2 years ago, we decided that we will ban from our platform fast fashion. That was a real political decision, but it has a huge impact in Europe, and actually put the topic of fast fashion on the table at France, and it became a law. But then France, because it's France, lately, politics, it's a mess. So they there is no assembly now. There is the president is doing a lot of different things. So now it's a bit on hold, but it passed. Actually, the fast fashion, the anti-fast fashion law passed because we managed to put that topic around the table, at the center of the conversation. It's our only power, because today, if we want to play with the same weapon as the big ones, we will lose. So we have to take our responsibility and to take some decision that will maybe not be aligned with our business, but at the end of the day, long story short, we did it 2 years ago. We thought, we are going to lose part of the market, the share, they will all go to the competitors, and actually 92% of the people who were impacted by the fast fashion ban stayed on the platform, spend differently, so they spend more money, but for less item, and we are monitoring their consumption habits. So I think when you're taking the decision and taking maybe the risk of taking the hit, good surprises are behind. And we share now our experience with other stakeholders from fashion, and we try to build a community together to fight the big ones.
As it relates to food, there's gobs of food policy happening out there, both locally, state-wise, and federally. I mean, there is the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act, which we can call our senators and congresspeople about. There is the Improvement to the Food Donation Act, which we can call our congresspeople and senators about. There's so much happening. Here in Washington State, I sat on the governing council of the Washington, the Coalition for Organic and Regenerative Agriculture, where we have been trying to make sure that we have a space for regenerative agriculture and organic agriculture to be more accessible and available to farmers who want to farm in this way. The Farm Bill, right? We've got to get organized around the Farm Bill, which is coming out in 2024. It was supposed to come out in 2023, but we missed the boat there. But the Farm Bill has an entire section that is being built into it that is all about increasing access and increasing land to grow food in a way that is more organic and regenerative. But we got to speak up about that. So people don't know about this because it's not something that people are reporting about. But it's happening. I can tell you about a few more other policies, but I do believe whether it's policies on the federal level or policies at your school, institutions and corporations are a big part of the problem, but they also can serve as part of the solutions. Believe me, corporations are feeling the heat, literally, about some of their practices and their supply chains because consumers are speaking up and say, by golly, and maybe they're not using that language, but they're saying, by golly, we want to see food that is grown in a way that is actually not poisoning communities, not hurting farmers, supporting local economies and creating a resilient food system that's going to actually help us to survive instead of destroying the environment and eroding the soil. They're hearing that loud and clear. General Mills, Unilever, they are changing their supply chain as a result of consumer advocacy. So those are a few thoughts for you there.
And there is the Fashion Act actually in the US. And New York and LA is pretty much very strong on changing some EPRs or responsibility on the producer. So I think LA and New York are ahead of the curve on fashion.
I'm going to say something that might start out sounding confusing, but hopefully will be clear when I finish, which is I think when it comes to lobbying policymakers, I think you need to start out by meeting them where they're at, but you need to end by telling them where to go. So in order to get into the conversation in the first place, it is all about money. It's all about money and it's all about politics. And at the end of the day, so I'll take travel for example, the industry does not want to tell shareholders that there is anything but constant growth all the time. But guess what? We live on a planet that does not have infinite resources or infinite places to go. So growth will have to stop at some point. There's plenty of growth that could still happen, but it's all growth. And it's all growth on the political side too, because ministers of tourism and other people who are managing tourism for a place, their mandate is to bring jobs. It's jobs, and it's all short-termism. So even if in the long run, we learn from our indigenous friends, for example, that we should be thinking several generations ahead for planning, but no one is doing this from a policy perspective or a private sector perspective in reality, because shareholders and citizens might want to hear differently about those baseline numbers. So when we had a report that we launched last year called Envision 2030, and we framed the central question of the report, how can the industry continue to grow along a business as usual trajectory and achieve its climate targets? Did we want to start with that question? Not really. We wanted to make it much more nuanced, but we knew that we've learned the hard way, people will not engage with that discussion at all. If you start from what if we explore degrowth as a scenario, So you need to get the permission in a way by meeting them where they're at, speaking their language, and trying to understand, I think, how you can enter the room. From there, it's really important, and now at the end, that you don't stay there forever, and that with that permission, that we can also come back and say, I'm sorry, but this is not far enough. This is performative. This does not achieve the scale or the speed that we need to react to the urgency of the situation, and therefore, now what we're going to demand is that, I like to say the climate does not give a crap about administrative boundaries, for example. But in my industry, no one collaborates across their administrative boundary because the funding is for that little place. So we're trying to address this in different ways by facilitating those conversations. But we can't. So at the end, I think to show leadership, and that's going to be required from people coming in and saying it's not enough. And we cannot look at these limited perspectives and allow that to remain the norm, because we're in a different paradigm now.
All right, we have hit the under 5-minute mark, so I want to make sure we get to at least one more question. So we're going to come up to the front because I know that you've been raising your hand for a while.
My question's for Jeremy. My name's Erin. And you set it up really well. So where should we be telling the travel industry to go?
Yeah, come with me and we'll talk. So, and my fellow panelists have eloquently shared that, you know, there are these sort of two sides, right? Like consumer demand and regulation. There's a great movement happening now on the regulatory side that consumers can really support, which is there are now green claims legislation, especially in Europe, which is wonderful. The industry is not excited about it, but I am, because the amount of greenwashing it's crazy. I mean, it is just out of control. The amount of things that are sustainable, and hey, we're this, we're that. And you can't be sustainable, by the way. Sustainability is a way to think about a system and how you would continuously adapt to be able to thrive into the future. There's no end point. But now we have sustainable travelers, sustainable trips, sustainable hotels. You can have it's not possible. So it's really been co-opted and it's a mess. And people need to start need to start demanding like better information and just not like crappy lexicon, you know. And then on the actual product side, the industry genuinely believes, and this plays out in the data, by the way, that there's this gap between intention and action when it comes to sustainable things. So the research will ask, do you want to be more sustainable in your well, yeah, sure, I do. 95%. So literally headlines come out from Booking.com and Expedia. 95% of travelers want to be more sustainable. So, and this is what is being used now to like stoke this conversation in the industry, and the industry isn't buying it because it's lame, you know. And then it doesn't play out. So actually, people do need to start making better choices at the end of the day. And as I've shared, that information is not easy to find. But the brand sort of solution to all of that, and it's more complicated, is that travel needs to be more local in all ways. And so that means, and in our report, which I referenced, long haul travel is on the, you know, is a target because. And it's not, and it's more nuanced than it has been in the media, flight shaming and stuff. But long haul travel we need to limit the growth of long haul travel from here for a period of time until airplanes can decarbonize. We are nowhere near that goal of decarbonization in the airline industry, no matter what the industry would like to tell you. So that means we have to be thoughtful about. That doesn't mean never travel, but yeah, maybe one trip. That's trip of a lifetime to New Zealand or Thailand or something from here, once, you know, not 5 times, you know, and that's just, these are some of the nuanced choices to make. And when you're in a place, being very conscious about where are things coming from, where is the food coming from, how do we keep things local, and how do we support small businesses, because at the end of the day, they're the ones who will suffer the most impact from climate. From climate effects. So. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I think that's it for questions. So I'm sure some of you guys will stay around and people can come up to you guys and ask more questions. But for now, let's give our panelists a big round of applause. And thank you guys for coming out. Really great questions.
Thank you.